All right, let's dive into something super interesting today, out of the box thinking. We're going to be looking at it through, this really unique lens, a lecture plan, actually. And it's all about teaching people how to unlock that creativity and innovation.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff.
I think, uh, uh, I think we could all use a little more of that,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially these days. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone is facing problems that need creative solutions.
Right. And I don't know about you, but I'm always trying to figure out how to be more innovative. And this lecture plan seems like it's just packed with different strategies and real world examples and
Yeah, and what I found really intriguing about it is how it uses this metaphor of a box, to represent those mental and societal constraints that we all have that kind of limit our creativity.
oh, that's interesting. So it's like, oh, like we're trapped in this box and
Kind of, yeah. It's a way to visualize those invisible barriers that are always kind of holding us back.
oh, I get it. It's like that saying, think outside the box. We've all heard that a million times, but I'm really curious to see how this lecture plan um breaks it down. Like what does that actually mean in practice?
Right. And I think that's what makes it so relevant.
Uh-huh. Well,
Like who doesn't want to be more innovative, especially in today's world where they're changing so fast. You got to be able to keep up.
yeah, you got to adapt.
Exactly. And the lecture plan makes a really good point. It says that out of the box thinking, it's not just a nice skill to have, it's becoming essential for navigating all the complexities of the modern world.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So it's like a survival skill almost.
In a way, yeah. And what's really interesting is it actually connects this to the prefrontal cortex.
Oh, wow. So like the brain science behind it.
Exactly. It suggests that we can actually rewire our brains to become more innovative thinkers.
Wow. So it's not just about like, some people are born creative and some aren't. It's like we can actually train ourselves to be more innovative.
That's what it suggests. Yeah.
That's fascinating. It makes you wonder, if we all have this potential to be creative powerhouses, but we just need to, tap into the right parts of our brains.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to hear more about how this lecture plan actually defines out of the box thinking. Like what are some of those key characteristics?
Well, it really emphasizes the importance of challenging assumptions.
Okay.
Like questioning the status quo and looking at things from multiple perspectives.
Right.
It argues that we're often so caught up in the way things are,
Yeah. Yeah.
that we forget to imagine how they could be.
Right. And I guess that's how a lot of big innovations happen, right? Like when people start to question the way things have always been done.
Yeah.
Like Tesla, for example. They completely disrupted the whole automotive industry by challenging that assumption that cars had to be powered by gasoline.
Yeah, that's a great example. And the lecture plan actually highlights a few other companies like that, like Apple and SpaceX.
Oh, yeah.
All of them, they've thrived because they dared to break free from that conventional thinking.
Right. Right. So they didn't just, accept the limitations that everyone else was working within. They were like, "Hey, what if we do things differently?"
Exactly.
But what's interesting is that the lecture plan doesn't just present those success stories, as just isolated incidents.
Yeah.
It connects them to the brain science, huh?
Yes.
Like you were saying before, suggesting that there's actually a neurological basis for this kind of innovative thinking.
Yeah.
So it's not just about, a few lucky geniuses who are born with a creative gene or whatever. It's like a skill that anyone can develop by understanding how their brain works.
That's the idea, yeah.
Mm.
It really delves into the role of the prefrontal cortex,
Mhm.
which is involved in all that planning and decision-making, complex behaviors.
Okay.
And it suggests that by consciously challenging our assumptions, and engaging in creative exercise, we can actually strengthen those neural pathways, the ones associated with innovative thinking.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And it even suggests that some constraints can actually boost creativity.
Wait, hold on. How can limitations be a good thing for creativity? That seems kind of counterintuitive.
It does, right. But the lecture plan, it uses this example of the Post-it note,
Oh, okay.
which was originally a failed attempt to create a super strong adhesive.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And that failure, it led to one of the most, like ubiquitous office supplies in the world.
Wow, I see what you mean. Sometimes those limitations, they force us to be more resourceful, right? And
Yeah.
to find creative workarounds, which can then lead to those unexpected breakthroughs. It's like, what's that saying? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly.
So sometimes you need those constraints to push you in a new direction.
Yeah. And it goes beyond just physical constraints too, you know.
Yeah.
The lecture plan, it argues that mental constraints, like our own assumptions and biases, can stifle creativity too.
Oh, so it's not just about, having limited resources or time. It's about having limited thinking.
Precisely. And it offers some fascinating techniques
Yeah.
for breaking free from those mental constraints,
Mhm.
like asking different questions.
Different questions, like how so?
Well, instead of focusing on why is this a problem,
Mm.
you know, it suggests asking, what if this problem didn't exist?
Mm-hmm.
Or what are the possibilities
Mhm.
that are hidden within this challenge?
Oh, that's interesting.
Wow.
It's like shifting your perspective. Like instead of focusing on the negative, you're looking for the potential, the opportunity. That's a really powerful shift. And it reminds me of Steve Jobs, and how he revolutionized personal computing by asking, why does a computer have to be so complicated?
Oh, yeah,
He challenged the existing paradigm and created something that was truly user-friendly.
exactly. And the lecture plan, it goes on to explore other techniques
Hmm.
for cultivating that out-of-the-box thinking, like mind mapping and brainstorming.
Right.
These tools can help us visualize our ideas and generate new possibilities, especially when we're feeling stuck.
Oh yeah, those are classics. But sometimes they can feel a little overwhelming, like where do you even start?
Yeah, well, the lecture plan, it actually provides some really clear guidance on how to use those tools effectively. And it also delves into some more structured approaches like lateral thinking
Okay.
and Edward de Bono's six thinking hats method.
Oh yeah, I've heard of the six thinking hats, but I've never really understood like how it works.
Yeah, it's basically a framework for looking at a problem from six distinct perspectives.
Okay.
So logic, emotion, optimism, pessimism, creativity, and control.
So you're kind of like putting on different hats.
Yeah, exactly. You're consciously wearing each hat to explore the problem more holistically, and that helps generate more innovative solutions.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like instead of getting trapped in one way of thinking, you're forced to consider the problem from all these different angles.
Exactly. And it's not just about considering those different perspectives yourself. It's about encouraging that diverse thinking within a team as well.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. So like you could have a team where everyone's wearing a different, metaphorical hat, and that could lead to some really creative solutions.
Precisely. And the lecture plan, it actually gives a real-world example of how a marketing team used the six thinking hats to develop a really successful campaign for a new product. They were able to anticipate potential problems, identify emotional hooks, generate innovative ideas that they might have missed if they had only looked at the problem from one perspective.
Oh, that's a great example. It shows how powerful this can be. It's not just about being a lone genius coming up with a brilliant idea. It's about creating a culture of out-of-the-box thinking, within a team or even an entire organization.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another key concept from the lecture plan, which is reverse thinking.
Reverse thinking.
Right.
I'm not sure I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's basically the idea of flipping a problem on its head
Okay.
and asking, what if we did the opposite? It's a way to break free from that conventional thinking, and uncovering new possibilities that we might have overlooked.
So instead of trying to solve a problem directly, you're looking for solutions in the opposite direction. And I'm trying to wrap my head around how that would actually work in practice.
Well, the lecture plan, it uses this example of Red Bull's marketing strategy.
Oh, okay.
So instead of targeting athletes directly, like, most sports drinks do, they focused on creating a kind of a counterculture image that appealed to a wider audience.
Okay.
And their unconventional approach, sponsoring extreme sports and stunts, it actually made their product more desirable.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, they challenged that traditional marketing playbook and created this unique brand identity.
So they basically turned their marketing on its head.
Exactly.
And it ended up being a brilliant strategy. It makes you wonder, what other boxes are we just blindly accepting in our own lives and work?
Right. And that's just one example of how reverse thinking can lead to innovative solutions. The lecture plan also explores how this technique has been used in fields like product design, problem solving, even personal development.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I'm starting to see how these techniques can be applied in so many different areas of life.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. And we've only just scratched the surface, right?
Right. The lecture plan, it goes on to explore even more techniques for cultivating out-of-the-box thinking, including cross-pollination.
Cross-pollination, what is that?
It involves borrowing ideas from different fields to spark innovation.
Oh, I see. Like how chefs sometimes, fuse culinary traditions to create unique dishes.
Exactly. It's about, looking for inspiration in unexpected places and seeing how ideas from one field can be applied to another.
Right, right.
Uh,
So you're not just limited to the ideas within your own field. You're looking everywhere for inspiration.
yeah. For example, a lecture plan, it highlights how principles from nature have inspired innovations in engineering and architecture,
Oh, that's cool.
or how the study of human psychology has led to breakthroughs in marketing and advertising.
Right, right. It's like taking those principles and applying them in a completely different context.
Exactly.
And it can lead to these really amazing innovations.
Yeah. It makes you wonder how many untapped possibilities are out there just waiting to be discovered, if we should start looking at things through a different lens.
Yeah, it's like the possibilities are endless, but it also sounds like it takes a certain mindset, to be open to those new ideas.
Absolutely. And that's one of the key takeaways from this section of the lecture plan.
Yeah,
Out-of-the-box thinking, it's not about having some kind of special talent.
right.
It's about being open to new ideas, challenging your assumptions, and being willing to experiment.
So it's more about cultivating a certain mindset, a way of approaching the world with curiosity and a willingness to try new things.
Exactly. But, as the lecture plan points out, there are also some potential barriers to overcome.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Well, one of the biggest barriers is fear of failure.
Yeah.
It's natural to be afraid of making mistakes,
Yeah, of course.
but that fear can paralyze us.
Yeah.
It can prevent us from taking risks. And the lecture plan, it highlights how essential it is to embrace experimentation and to learn from those mistakes.
Right.
It even shares stories of major tech companies, who turn their failures into successes.
So it's not about avoiding failure altogether. It's about learning to fail forward.
Precisely. And the lecture plan also discusses other mental blocks that can hinder creativity, like perfectionism and self-doubt.
Oh, yeah.
And it suggests strategies like brain dumping to get past those blocks.
Yeah.
And allow our ideas to flow more freely.
That makes sense. We all have that inner critic, right? That tells us our ideas aren't good enough. But maybe if we just get those thoughts out of our heads, without judgment, then we can start to see new possibilities.
Exactly. And the lecture plan, it doesn't just focus on individual mindsets. It also emphasizes the importance of creating the right environment for out-of-the-box thinking.
Okay, so like having a supportive team or a workplace that encourages experimentation.
Exactly. Open communication, freedom to explore new ideas, and collaboration, they're all crucial for fostering a culture of innovation.
And I think the lecture plan uses some really inspiring real-world examples to illustrate this point, right?
Yes. And I think those examples are a great place to pick up after a quick break.
Okay, sounds good to me. We'll be right back with more insights on how to unleash your inner innovator. All right, so before the break, we were talking about these companies that have really excelled at fostering this out-of-the-box thinking and using it to their advantage.
Yeah, some really inspiring examples in this lecture plan, like, Netflix. I mean, they completely revolutionized how we consume entertainment.
Right. Going from those DVD rentals, remember those?
Yeah, to this streaming giant.
Yeah.
That willingness to embrace new technologies and just adapt to those changing consumer habits.
Like really paying attention to what people want.
Yeah, it's a great example of foresight and just thinking unconventionally.
Totally. I mean, they disrupted their own business model before anyone else could.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
And talking about disrupting things, the lecture plan also talks about the Wright brothers,
Oh, yeah.
who,
Yeah.
I mean, they wanted to fly at a time when everyone thought it was impossible.
Dare to dream, right.
Yeah.
And their story is a powerful reminder that real innovation often means challenging what everyone thinks is possible.
Hmm.
I mean, they faced so much skepticism, so many setbacks, but they just kept going.
They had that persistence, that drive.
And ultimately, changed the course of history.
It's wild to think that just over 100 years ago, the idea of powered flight was just like a radical idea.
Yeah.
And now we just hop on a plane without even thinking twice.
It's part of our everyday lives now.
But it makes you think, right? What groundbreaking ideas are out there right now that we haven't even thought of?
Exactly. I mean, that's what's so exciting about out-of-the-box thinking, you know?
Yeah.
It's about pushing past those limitations, those boundaries of our current understanding, and just imagining what could be.
What if?
Yeah. And the lecture plan brings up another company that embodies this spirit, SpaceX,
Oh, Elon Musk's company, right? With those ambitious goals.
aiming to make humanity a multiplanetary species.
Talk about challenging assumptions.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, their vision for space travel it exemplifies risk-taking. It's all about iterative experimentation. You know, they've had failures, of course.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
But they see each setback as an opportunity to learn and refine their approach.
Some people might call it reckless.
Maybe, but I think you could also argue that you can't really achieve like groundbreaking innovation without taking risks. Right?
Okay.
You got to push those boundaries, and I think the lecture plan uses SpaceX as a kind of a model for applying that out-of-the-box thinking to, you know, these big, huge challenges.
Right, like literal rocket science.
Yeah, exactly. But it also provides some more practical tips for incorporating these principles into our everyday lives.
Okay, yeah. So how do we actually, put this into practice? What can we do, on a daily basis to cultivate this more creative mindset?
Well, one of the most, I think, accessible techniques is journaling.
Oh, okay.
Just taking a few minutes each day to write down your thoughts, your ideas, your observations.
It's like a brain dump, kind of.
Kind of, yeah. It helps clear that mental clutter and make space for those new insights.
I've heard about journaling for, processing emotions and stress,
Yeah.
but I never thought about it as a tool for boosting creativity.
Well, it can be. It's like giving your brain a blank canvas,
Yeah.
to just play with ideas.
Yeah, I like that.
And the lecture plan also recommends things like meditation and mindfulness.
Oh, okay.
They can help quiet that constant mental chatter, improve your focus.
I've tried some guided meditation apps.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I felt more relaxed and centered afterward.
It's all interconnected. When
Yeah.
you reduce stress and improve that mental clarity, it creates space for those creative sparks to emerge.
Makes sense.
And then alongside those internal practices, the lecture plan encourages us to seek out new experiences.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Try a new hobby, take a different route to work, even just strike up a conversation with someone you wouldn't normally talk to.
Oh, I like that. Just get out of your comfort zone a bit.
Yeah, just shake things up. Introduce a little randomness into your life.
Yeah. It's like you said before, challenging those assumptions, not just assuming that, your routine is the only way to do things.
Right. And alongside those individual efforts, the lecture plan also highlights the importance of building a supportive network.
Oh, okay. So people who challenge our thinking and inspire us to try new things.
Yeah, exactly. Surround yourself with people who encourage you to think differently.
Like having a good group of friends who are always pushing you to be your best self.
Yeah, and who aren't afraid to challenge your assumptions. It's like having a team of creativity coaches cheering you on.
I love that. It reminds me of those brainstorming sessions, where you start with one idea and then it just snowballs into something completely unexpected and innovative.
Yeah. It's amazing what can happen when you bring together a diverse group of people and let those ideas flow freely.
But the lecture plan, it also warns against falling into that trap of groupthink, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, collaboration's essential for those new ideas, but it's also important to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, those different perspectives, that no one feels pressured to just go along with the majority opinion.
That's such a good point. Sometimes those really out-of-the-box ideas are the ones that get shut down the fastest,
Yeah, they can be threatening to the status quo.
Right. But maybe if we create a space where those ideas are welcomed, where people feel safe to share those different perspectives, maybe we can unlock some truly innovative solutions.
Absolutely. And it brings us back to that importance of cultivating that culture of out-of-the-box thinking, not just within ourselves, but within our teams and organizations as a whole.
Yeah.
It's about creating an environment where people feel safe to take those risks, to experiment, to challenge conventional wisdom.
Yeah, and not be afraid to fail.
Exactly.
Because sometimes those failures lead to the biggest breakthroughs.
And the lecture plan, it argues that this whole mindset, it's becoming increasingly essential in today's world, with technology changing so rapidly and everything so interconnected.
Right, we need to be adaptable.
We need to be able to adapt quickly to solve those complex problems
Yeah.
and to come up with creative solutions that maybe we haven't even imagined before.
It's like the pace of change is just accelerating, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be able to keep up. It makes you wonder, like, what skills are going to be essential for, future innovators and problem solvers?
That's a great question. And I think the lecture plan provides a really good foundation for navigating that unknown future. It's not about, trying to predict what specific skills we'll need, but rather developing that flexible and adaptable mindset.
Being able to embrace change.
Yeah. And thrive in uncertainty.
It sounds like out-of-the-box thinking is becoming like less of a specialized skill, and more of a fundamental life skill.
Yeah, I agree. Like critical thinking or emotional intelligence.
Yeah, something we all need to develop if we want to thrive in this crazy world.
I agree. And the lecture plan, it doesn't just present this as, like some lofty ideal.
Yeah.
It provides actual practical steps for making out-of-the-box thinking a habit.
Oh, okay. So how do we actually do that? What are some of those practical steps?
Well, it emphasizes setting, like intentional goals for pushing those creative boundaries. It could be trying a new problem-solving technique every week.
Oh.
Reading a book on a totally unfamiliar topic.
Yeah.
Or even just making a conscious effort to question your assumptions in everyday situations.
So just being more aware of those boxes that we put ourselves in.
Exactly. It's about actively seeking out those opportunities to challenge ourselves and stretch those creative muscles.
Yeah, not just waiting for inspiration to strike,
Right. It's making out-of-the-box thinking part of how we approach the world rather than just a once-in-a-while activity.
And I think that's a really powerful idea. It's not just about coming up with, the next big invention or disrupting an entire industry. It's about approaching everyday challenges with a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
And finding creative solutions that we might have otherwise missed.
Exactly. And the lecture plan highlights how this approach can lead to greater fulfillment and success in all areas of life.
Yeah. Right. Not just in our work, but in our relationships, our hobbies.
Yeah. Whether it's personal relationships, your career, or even, those creative pursuits.
This has been incredibly insightful. I'm feeling inspired to, really reevaluate my own approach to problem solving.
Yeah.
And to be more intentional about cultivating a more creative mindset. What are some key takeaways that you think our listeners should walk away with?
Well, I think one of the most important takeaways is that, out-of-the-box thinking, it's not some mysterious talent that only a few people have. It's a skill that anyone can develop,
Yeah.
with practice, with intention.
Yeah. Like we were talking about before, it's about rewiring those neural pathways in our brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's becoming increasingly essential for navigating, this complex, challenging world that we live in.
Definitely. And for me, the biggest takeaway is that power of challenging our assumptions. We get so stuck in those familiar ways of thinking, We don't even realize we're limiting ourselves. But if we can learn to question those assumptions, look at things from different perspectives.
Yeah, then the possibilities are endless.
That's like a whole new world opens up.
And it reminds us that, even in the face of uncertainty in a world that's constantly changing, we have the power to shape our own destinies.
Right. It's about taking control.
Yeah, embracing that mindset of creativity, curiosity, and that willingness to step outside those comfort zones.
This has been such a fantastic deep dive.
Yeah, I've had
So many great insights, so many practical tools.
It covered a lot of ground.
And I'm feeling really inspired to, put some of this into practice. But before we wrap things up, I want to hear more about that Q&A section.
Yeah.
And that powerful final thought that you mentioned earlier.
Right, of course. That's where we'll pick up after a quick break.
Sounds good to me. We'll be back in a flash to finish our exploration of out-of-the-box thinking. Okay, so we're back, ready to kind of wrap things up here.
Yeah.
We're talking about, that Q&A section and the final thought. What's the lecture plan's approach to those?
It's funny because the lecture plan actually anticipates that people might feel a little overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah, I could see that.
By all these techniques.
Yeah.
So the Q&A is designed to be very practical.
Oh, okay.
Relatable. It addresses those common concerns, like how do I actually use this in my daily work?
Right.
What if my company just doesn't support out-of-the-box thinking?
Yeah, because it's one thing to get excited about these concepts, but then you have to actually put them into practice. And that can be tough.
It is. And the lecture plan encourages people to start small. You know,
Oh.
pick one technique that really speaks to you
Hmm.
and experiment with it in a low-stakes situation. It emphasizes that it's a journey,
Right.
not a destination. It's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
In fact, those mistakes, they're valuable learning opportunities.
It's like that whole growth mindset thing.
Yeah. Right.
Embrace those challenges and see those setbacks as opportunities for growth.
Yeah. It makes me think about a time when I was working on a project
Mm.
and I just felt completely stuck.
Hmm.
And I decided to try a mind map, which I don't know, I always kind of dismissed it as too touchy-feely or whatever.
Yeah.
But to my surprise, it really helped me see the problem from a totally different angle.
Hmm.
And I was able to come up with a solution that I never would have thought of otherwise.
That's a perfect example of how even a simple technique, can make a big difference when we're willing to just step outside of our comfort zones.
Right.
And the lecture plan, it really emphasizes that, finding what works for you.
Yeah.
Not every technique's going to resonate with everyone.
Of course.
And that's fine. It's about experimenting.
Finding what helps you unlock your own unique creative potential.
That's a great point. And I love how the lecture plan doesn't just, end with the Q&A.
Yeah.
It leaves the audience with this final thought that really ties everything together.
It does. That final thought is creativity isn't just a skill, it's a mindset anyone can cultivate to thrive in the modern world.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so empowering.
It is?
It's like it's reminding us that we're not limited by, our current circumstances or our perceived abilities. Like we all have the capacity to think differently,
Yeah.
to challenge assumptions, to create something new, and that's a really exciting prospect.
It is. It's about recognizing that out-of-the-box thinking, it's not just for artists or inventors. It's a way of approaching the world
Right.
with curiosity, openness,
Yeah.
and that willingness to just embrace those new possibilities.
Well said. Well, this deep dive has been fantastic. I mean, we've gotten so many practical tools and techniques.
Yeah, a lot to think about.
But it's also, inspired us to really challenge our own assumptions, embrace that more creative mindset.
It's a great reminder that, we have the power
Hmm.
to change our thinking and ultimately, change our lives.
I completely agree. And as we wrap up, I'd like to leave our listeners with a challenge. What's one box in your own life, or your work that you've always just accepted as a given?
Hmm.
What happens if you turn that assumption upside down? Ask a different question or maybe borrow an idea from a totally unrelated field.
It's a great challenge. I hope everyone listening will really take some time to think about that.
Yeah. And to our amazing listeners, we'd love to hear about, your own aha moments, your out-of-the-box breakthroughs.
Yeah, share your experiences with us.
So until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep pushing those boundaries.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about.
That's a wrap on our deep dive into out-of-the-box thinking. Thanks for joining us.